and he was thrown in jail. He had violated the Official Secrets Act. He was persecuted and, I think, driven really to insanity, quite frankly. But the fact is that this was in 1995, and the scenario then, I think, is the same one we have now. It was to eliminate Gaddafi, start a civil war, accuse Al-Qaeda of being one of the sides, and then invade. Because you've got these oil.
Well, and as you speak, we've got a couple naval ships in the area, and they are seriously contemplating sending our jets into Libya to do some tactical hits.
Exactly. And I think this would be a disaster for the United States. It's a kind of a last gasp of imperialism. We could go through Mubarak and quite a few others, but maybe the why of this, I think, is what interests many people.
Yeah, because first of all, I've not been a supporter of Gaddafi. To me, he was one of the ultimate terrorists. He took down planes, he created all kinds of things, yet we allowed this clown to stay in office for so long. So get into the why, Webster.
I would just have to say first, the Lockerbie story, I think at the time there was more evidence against Syria than there was against Gaddafi, but the U.S. didn't want to take that seriously. The La Belle Discothèque of 1986 was done by the investigation was done by a very corrupt German police official who's still around in some form. I don't think that one is proved either. You have to look at Gaddafi and say, if you can survive for 42 years in that kind of an atmosphere, you are a pretty tough cookie, and you're actually pretty smart.
You
right?
got to be.
He is. But now, what is the why? I would say that the general reason for this is now kind of a worldwide campaign, and it's a flight forward. It's an orgy of destabilization. It's a wild rampage of coups and flailing, lashing out in all directions against all of these countries by the U.S. and the British primarily. And I think the issue is the U.S. empire in the Middle East is in the process of collapsing. And the form that this takes is some countries are playing the Russia card, some countries are playing the China card, some countries are playing the Iran card, and the U.S.-British answer to that is destabilize all of them, paralyze them, if necessary, break them into parts, right? Sudan has been broken.
It's easier for us to control that way.
Right. The smaller, it's the empire, is the overarching thing is the empire with the International Monetary Fund. And then, instead of having nation states that can defend themselves to some extent, you've got a bunch of petty, a checkerboard, a crazy quilt of petty, impotent, squabbling states. Sudan has just been carved into two parts.
Yeah.
Libya is in the process of being carved into two parts, as far as we can see.
Is the goal...
Yemen, same story, two parts.
Is the goal still Iran?
Yes, although the goal, of course, is when you listen to the crazier supporters of this wave of coups, they will tell you, we have now got the attention of the youth generation in the Arab world. We've got about 180 to 200 million college-educated, unemployed youth who don't believe in anything. They hate their governments, but they hate the Islamists and they hate the opposition. I would call them nihilists because I think that's what they are.
Do they hate us too?
Well, no. This is the one thing, is that they probably think Hollywood is cool and Google is cool and Twitter is cool. So they're cosmopolitan and pro-Western in that cultural way.
Okay, interesting.
Look, in terms of who's doing what, let's see. Who's playing the Russian card right now? Well, Saudi Arabia has a faction around Prince Bandar. And back in 2008, there was a big flap about how Bandar, who was thought to be the most pro-U.S., right? This is Bandar Bush, the guy who was in Washington for so many years. He was in favor of essentially playing the Russian card, using Russia to balance the U.S. and keeping the place independent. Another example is Karzai in Afghanistan. He has played the China card, but he's playing the Russian card most recently. He took a visit to Moscow. The U.S. freaked out over that.
Well, he was our guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's what's ironic, is if you can't control Karzai when you're militarily occupying the country, this points to this tremendous weakness in the U.S. imperialist model, because the U.S. domination is unbearable, because what it comes down to is no economic development is offered. You're forced under the conditionalities of the International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Organization. You don't get anything for this, and at the same time, you've got people like these charming ladies, Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice, are sticking their noses into your internal affairs and telling you that you're a dictator and you're an oppressor, whereas with the Chinese, you get a real deal, you get real economic development, and they couldn't care less about your domestic stuff. Here, another country that's playing the Russian card, Italy. This is really important because this reaches into Western Europe with one of the big countries. There is a kind of axis between Putin in Russia and Berlusconi of Italy, and it's probably not well known. But if you look at these countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Bahrain, Algeria, right, the ones that are under the gun right now, Italy is too. Berlusconi is the target of a kind of creeping coup by the it comes down to a communist president of Italy, Napolitano.
Let's come right back, Webster. We'll talk about that because you're right. They're going after him too. We'll be back in a moment. And Webster, we've already seen what's happening to the price of oil with just what's been happening in Libya lately. I guess that could go even higher, can it?
Yes, and this is a benefit for Wall Street because that is an artificial demand for dollars. Now we've had the Federal Reserve put out $3.3 trillion of emergency credit to the zombie banks and the various hedge fund hyenas in Wall Street, and the Treasury about $700 billion with this TARP. So there's a lot of dollars sloshing around the world. Now with QE2 from Bernanke, there's another $600 billion. So there's a lot of dollar liquidity that tends to drive the dollar down. There's always an impulse towards a dollar collapse unless they do something about it. So one of the things they've done is start this wave of destabilizations with the idea that if you can destabilize Libya, that's already 2% of the world oil, and Libya is also absolutely critical for various places in Europe. And if you look at, I have this interesting breakdown here. Italy gets 22% of their oil from Libya. France gets 16%. Germany, the heart of the whole economy, 8%. Austria, 21%. So Europe is generally between 10-15% from Libya. The U.S. is 0.5%. So if the Libyan oil is shut down, right, if Gaddafi burns the wells the way Saddam Hussein did, that's a knockout blow for Europe.
Right.
Which is, from the point of view of these CIA characters, that's good. And the U.S. is basically untouched. There's also some pretty serious damage for China. They would lose about 3%, which would be significant in price terms. So, yes, that's another added benefit. But we were talking about Berlusconi. This is very little understood.
He's under fire out there, isn't he?
He has been indicted 30 times now in the past couple of years by some out of control judges in Milan, magistrates, so-called. And these people are obviously working for the intelligence agencies of the U.S.
And he's been indicted on all kinds of things, right?
All kinds of things. And they sent in a sex operative at one point, a prostitute, and you could hear the tapes.
He took the bait?
Oh, yes, of course. But this is a grown woman. There's nothing illegal about this.
Right.
She's a professional. And he says to her, darling, I'm going to take a shower. Wait for me in Putin's bed. And Putin's bed means, and you can hear this on these tapes that she made, it means that Putin is his personal friend and had given him an antique four-poster Russian wooden bed. So this gets right to the heart of the matter. The Russian-Italy alliance yields this thing called the South Stream pipeline, which is a way you can get gas from Russia into Central Europe, so everybody can have it, and you don't go through these virulently anti-Russian countries in Eastern Europe. So you could say that Italy is playing the Russian card. Berlusconi is also playing the Libya card. I mean, the economic ties between Italy and Libya are extremely close. Italy is the former colonial power. If Libya goes down, the biggest immediate loser is Italy. There's also something similar happening in Northern Europe. There's now the Nord Stream pipeline, which also goes from Russia. It goes down the bottom of the Baltic Sea, and it gets into Germany. So it does not go through the Baltic states or Poland or Ukraine or any of these other countries that have a history of, quarreling with Russia over the gas, the price of gas, the tolls that are paid, and so forth. So you could say that Germany and Italy more so, but Germany to a certain extent, have played the Russian card. And the U.S. did not want any of this. The U.S. approach to this was always to block it. So a lot of people playing the Russian card. How about if we look at who's playing the China card? Well, Karzai was one of the first in Afghanistan. You may remember a little bit less than a year ago, Obama made an emergency trip out of the clear blue sky. He ran to Kabul to have a meeting with Karzai.
Right.
This was because Karzai had gone to Beijing and signed all kinds of economic development deals, exactly the kind of thing that the U.S. either cannot or will not do anymore. Libya has there are about 30,000 Chinese workers in Libya, and they're in the process of being kicked out. And this is one of the things that the U.S. is interested in doing. One of the main goals of U.S. foreign policy these days is to kick the Chinese out of Africa, deny the Chinese the oil, the strategic raw materials, say in a place like Zimbabwe.
Why are we pushing them?
It is because the U.S. economy is now so weak and so far gone and so financialized and so looted by Wall Street that we simply cannot compete in what used to be our strong suit, which was industrial capitalism, heavy industry, development investments, engineering, right, building dams, railroads, power stations, rural electrification, agriculture, all of these things. The U.S. is now essentially a country that has lots of derivatives, lots of paper speculation, but nothing much to offer in these other terms. And this is really the crisis. This is why you've got so little to offer these countries.
We've got the one thing they don't have, the military. Yeah,
but now even this, if you look at the Israelis invading Lebanon in 2006, they took it on the chin.
It didn't work this time.
One armored division, and so that was one of the reasons the Brzezinski people, this big new Brzezinski faction, made this big comeback with Obama. It was the general idea of this book that I mentioned before.